She smashed my greenhouse with a hammer, not a metaphor, not a misunderstanding. Diane Forsyth, HOA board member, stood in my backyard on a Tuesday morning and swung a claw hammer into $58,000 worth of tempered glass and custom aluminum framing. Security cameras caught every second, every swing, every smirk. Here is what she did not know. I held original deed covenant rights predating the HOA's incorporation by 11 years. Rights so airtight that every citation, every fine, every legal threat she had issued was void from the moment she typed it. Every plant inside that greenhouse was documented, legally acquired, exotic horticulture, nothing suspicious, nothing illegal, just rare. And I had been quietly building a case for 8 months before she ever picked up that hammer. So here's my question for you. Have you ever watched someone destroy something irreplaceable, smiled politely, and thought, just wait? Because that is exactly what I did. Stick around. Justice arrived. And it arrived very publicly. Let me back up. My name is Marcus Hale. I am 61 years old. I spent 28 years as a professional horticulturalist, university-trained, licensed, the kind of person who can identify a plant genus from 30 feet away and tell you its soil pH requirements without blinking. I retired 4 years ago, not because I wanted to stop working with plants, because Elena got sick. Elena was my wife of 33 years. She was diagnosed with stage 3 ovarian cancer in the spring of what should have been our first year of real retirement. We had plans, a garden, travel, time. Cancer does not negotiate. She fought for 14 months. She was extraordinary. She lost anyway. She always wanted a proper greenhouse, not a kit from a big box store, a real one, climate-controlled, glass-paneled, with a propagation bench and a misting system and enough space to walk between the rows without turning sideways. We talked about it for years. I built it after she died. It took me 6 months. I planted everything she ever asked me to find. Rare orchids, heritage ferns, tropical specimens she had circled in catalogs. It was a memorial. It was also the most beautiful thing I had ever made. I moved to the Sycamore Ridge community specifically because the lot was large enough and the deed covenants, which I read in their entirety before signing anything, protected my right to maintain horticultural structures on my own property. I had a real estate attorney confirm it in writing, twice. I was not careless. I was a horticulturalist. I read the fine print. That is when Diane Forsyth arrived. She came on a Wednesday afternoon, 3 weeks after I moved in. She had a clipboard with a laminated cover. She wore a lanyard with her HOA board title printed in bold. She had the focused certainty of someone who had finally found a stage proportional to her ambitions. She stood at the edge of my property, looked at the greenhouse, which was finished, gleaming, and entirely within my lot lines, and wrote something down without speaking to me first. When she finally spoke, she called it an unapproved structure. I told her it was a greenhouse. She said the HOA had not approved it. I told her my deed covenants predated the HOA's authority over horticultural structures. She wrote something else down. She said I would be hearing from the board. She said it like a threat. It was meant to be one. I smiled. I said I looked forward to it. Big mistake. Hers, not mine. Day 4. The first citation arrived. Formal letter, HOA letterhead, citing a vague provision about accessory structures requiring board approval. Fine, $200. I photographed the letter, logged it, placed it in a binder. The binder was blue. I bought it specifically for this. Day 9. A second citation, same provision, different wording. Fine, $350. I photographed it, logged it, binder, day 14. Diane knocked on my door with a man she introduced as a county surveyor. He had a clipboard too, but his was not laminated. He walked the perimeter of the greenhouse with a measuring tape and said nothing useful. I asked for his county credentials. He handed me a business card from a private surveying firm. Not county, not official, not anything. I photographed the card, logged it, binder, day 19. A letter from what was described as the HOA's legal counsel demanded I dismantle the greenhouse within 30 days or face escalating fines and potential litigation. The letterhead listed a law firm name. I searched the state bar database that evening. The firm existed. The attorney named on the letter did not appear in active standing. I photographed everything, logged it. The binder was getting thick. Day 23. Diane appeared at my fence line with two other board members. They stood there for approximately 40 minutes, pointing at the greenhouse and speaking in low voices. I watched from inside. I did not go out. I let the cameras watch for me. Day 31. Someone pried open the greenhouse side vent and left the climate system running at maximum heat overnight. 3 orchid specimens, irreplaceable, 2 of them Elena's specific requests, were damaged beyond recovery. I called the non-emergency police line, filed a report, photographed the damage, estimated replacement value, $4,200, logged it, binder, day 38. A flyer appeared in neighborhood mailboxes. It did not name me directly. It referred to a resident who was, quote, cultivating unidentified plant species of unknown origin and possible legal concern. It suggested neighbors contact the board with any observations. I obtained 3 copies from neighbors who brought them to me directly. Photographed, logged, binder, day 44. A woman I did not recognize knocked on my door and identified herself as a code enforcement officer. She was not. I asked for her county employee ID. She did not have one. She left. I noted her license plate, logged it, binder, day 51. A second overnight incident. Someone had used a key or similar object to scratch a long line across one glass panel. I had the repair estimate in writing by noon the next day, $1,800. Logged, binder, day 57. Diane filed a formal complaint with the actual county code enforcement office, alleging my greenhouse contained, quote, suspicious and potentially controlled botanical specimens. A real code enforcement officer arrived 2 days later. He walked through the greenhouse with me for 20 minutes. He identified every plant I named. He was, if anything, impressed. He found nothing actionable. His report said so in writing. I requested a copy. Logged it, binder, day 63. The HOA held a community meeting I was not invited to. 3 neighbors told me afterward that Diane had presented a slideshow, photographs of my greenhouse taken from the street and from what appeared to be over my fence line. She described the plants inside as, quote, exotic species of unclear provenance. She suggested the community had a right to know what was being grown next door. She did not mention that a county officer had already cleared the property. I documented everything. Every letter, every citation, every fake credential, every scratch on the glass. The binder had a second volume by now. Here is what I was doing while all of this was happening. I was not panicking. I was not retaliating. I was reading. I went back to the original deed covenants, the ones from 1987, 11 years before this HOA was incorporated. I had a property rights attorney named Gerald Fitch review them. Gerald found something Diane had apparently never considered. The covenants included a specific easement protecting horticultural use of rear lot structures in perpetuity, binding on all successor associations. The HOA's own founding documents, which I obtained through a public records request, had incorporated those covenants by reference. Every fine they issued was void. Every citation was legally unenforceable. Every demand letter was built on sand. But Gerald also found something else. Cross-referencing the HOA's financial filings, he noticed irregularities. Assessment funds collected but not accounted for in meeting minutes, vendor payments to companies that did not appear in any business registry, Diane Forsyth's signature on disbursement approvals totaling across 3 fiscal years just over $91,000 in unverifiable expenditures. I did not confront her. I did not call the board. I contacted the state's HOA Oversight Division and a local investigative journalist named Claire Moss, who covered municipal affairs for the regional paper. I gave Claire a copy of the binder, both volumes. She read it over a weekend and called me Monday morning. She had questions, good ones. Diane had organized what she called a community standards forum. She invited the local news station. She planned to present her case against my greenhouse publicly, on camera. As a demonstration of the board's commitment to neighborhood integrity, she sent formal invitations. She printed programs. I attended. I sat in the third row. I brought Gerald. Diane opened with a prepared statement about community values and property standards. She had a podium. She had a microphone. She had a PowerPoint. She was 3 slides in when Claire Moss stood up from the press section and asked on the record whether Diane wished to comment on the State Oversight Division's pending investigation into HOA financial irregularities totaling over $91,000. Diane stopped speaking. Gerald stood up next. He addressed the room. He explained clearly and without drama that every citation issued to my property was legally void under the 1987 deed covenants. He named the specific provision. He had printed copies for anyone who wanted one. 2 county investigators were in the back of the room. They had been there since the start. They walked to the front when Gerald finished. They served Diane Forsyth with a formal notice of investigation for misappropriation of HOA funds and filing false complaints with county code enforcement, on camera. In the room she had rented, in front of the neighbors she had tried to mobilize against me. She was removed from the board that evening by emergency vote. The greenhouse is still standing. Every plant survived except the 3 orchids. I found replacements for 2 of them. The third one, Elena's favorite. I am still looking. I always find what I am looking for eventually. Now, before I tell you about the aftermath, I want to tell you about 4 other people who crossed paths with the same kind of entitled certainty. The clipboard and lanyard variety. The kind that mistakes a little institutional power for a lot of personal authority. Because Marcus Hale was not alone. Not even close. Renata Voss, 64 years old, 31 years as a licensed pharmacist. The kind who actually reads the monographs, who knows the Latin names, who can recite contraindications for 17 drug classes without checking a reference. She retired when her husband Bernard was diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. Bernard survived, 3 years clear. But somewhere in the middle of the treatment, she started growing things. Medicinal herbs, chamomile, valerian, ashwagandha, echinacea, Tulsi. A small raised bed that grew into a dedicated side yard garden with labeled rows and a hand-painted sign Bernard made during recovery that read Renata's Pharmacy. She moved to the Millbrook Terrace community because the HOA's published guidelines said nothing about medicinal herb gardens. She checked. She is a pharmacist. She reads documents carefully. Patricia Hume, HOA president, read them differently. Patricia drove a white SUV with a custom license plate frame that said, Community First. She appeared at Renata's side yard gate 9 days after move-in, looked at the labeled herb rows, and asked what Renata was growing. Renata told her, in detail, with Latin names. Patricia wrote something on her clipboard and said the board would be in touch. The citations came on day 6, day 11. Fake inspectors arrived on day 17. 2 men with clipboards and no county credentials who photographed the herb rows from inside Renata's gate, which they had opened without asking. A letter from the HOA's attorney on day 22 described the plants as, quote, unidentified botanical specimens of unknown classification. Renata is a pharmacist. She had labeled every plant in Latin. The labels were visible in the photographs the fake inspectors had taken. Day 33, someone removed the hand-painted sign Bernard made, gone when Renata went out in the morning. She filed a police report and logged the photographs she had taken the day Bernard finished it. Day 51, Someone poured a commercial herbicide solution along the eastern edge of the garden. The soil test confirmed it. Estimated damage, $900. By day 58, Patricia was holding neighborhood watch meetings, showing photographs of the herb garden and using the phrase suspicious cultivation without mentioning the health department inspector who had already cleared the property and expressed genuine admiration for the ashwagandha. Renata contacted the university extension office. A botanist named Dr. Amos Treadwell came on a Tuesday, spent 2 hours, and produced a 9-page written identification of every plant. Legal, documented, medicinally classified, commercially available. Her attorney, Susan Park, pulled the HOA's financial records and found assessment overcharges and vendor payments to a landscaping company sharing a mailing address with Patricia's sister-in-law. Roughly $34,000 in irregular disbursements over 3 years. Renata contacted the state HOA regulatory board and a reporter named James Osei who covered neighborhood governance. She gave James the binder. He called the next morning. He had already started making calls. Patricia's public community health and safety forum lasted 4 minutes before James Osei asked on the record whether she wished to respond to the HOA regulatory board's preliminary finding of financial irregularities. Dr. Treadwell stood up and named every plant in the garden by species, looking directly at Patricia when he said the word unidentified. 2 regulatory investigators served Patricia with a formal notice of investigation at her own event. She was suspended from the board that night. Bernard's sign was never recovered. He made a new one. It is better than the first one. He is still in remission. Dale Okonkwo, 57 years old. 24 years as an agricultural extension agent, the person county farmers call when they cannot identify a pest, a blight, or a plant at the edge of their field. He has identified over 300 plant species in the field without a reference book. His wife Adayeze died of a stroke 18 months before he moved to the Lakeview Commons community. She was 53. No warning. One morning she was making coffee and then she was not. He does not have a gentler way to say it. Adayeze grew up in southeastern Nigeria and had a specific, vivid memory of the fruit trees from her grandmother's compound: breadfruit, African star apple, bitter cola, soursop. After she died, Dale spent 8 months sourcing specimens. Some came from specialty nurseries in Florida. One came from a botanical garden in the UK that had been propagating the variety for 40 years. He planted them in his rear yard at Lakeview Commons. The HOA's CC&Rs permitted rear yard fruit trees, explicitly. He had that in writing before he signed anything. Carol Strike, HOA vice president, appeared at his rear fence on day 5. She looked at the trees and said the board might have concerns. Day 8, citation. Day 15, second citation. Day 21. 2 men arrived claiming to represent a county agricultural compliance office. Lanyards, no IDs. A business card for a private consulting firm. Day 27. A letter from the HOA's attorney described the trees as, quote, unidentified exotic species of unknown origin that may constitute a cannabis cultivation operation. Dale is a 24-year agricultural extension agent. He had breadfruit trees. The letter went into the binder next to a photograph of a breadfruit tree, so there would be no confusion for anyone who read it later. Day 33, Carol filed a formal complaint with the county sheriff's office, alleging possible controlled substance cultivation. 2 deputies arrived. One of them recognized the soursop. His grandmother grew them in Puerto Rico. The report found no evidence of any controlled substance. Day 44, someone cut the support stake on the breadfruit specimen, the one from the UK Botanical Garden. Clean cut, not wind damage. Dale staked it again, photographed the cut, filed a police report. Day 62, a letter arrived on what appeared to be State Department of Agriculture letterhead with one word in the agency name transposed. Dale noticed immediately. His attorney Priya Nair confirmed it was fabricated. Priya pulled Carol Strike's name through the state HOA regulatory database. Carol had served on 2 previous boards. Both ended with her removal under disputed circumstances. One had filed a civil complaint against her for unauthorized disbursement of funds. The complaint had been settled quietly. Priya contacted the State Attorney General's Consumer Protection Division. Dale provided 3 binder volumes, a 9-page botanical identification report from Dr. Felicia Osei at the State University's Tropical Horticulture Program, the fabricated letters, the sheriff's clearance, and a signed account from a neighbor named Phil describing a false statement Carol had tried to get him to sign against Dale. The AG's office opened a formal investigation. Carol's Lakeview Commons annual community meeting ended when a television producer, tipped off by Priya, asked on camera whether Carol wished to respond to the State Attorney General's investigation into her conduct at Lakeview Commons and 2 prior HOA boards. Dr. Osei stood, named every tree by species, held up a photograph of a breadfruit, and stated clearly that a breadfruit tree and a cannabis plant share no visual characteristics whatsoever. The AG's investigators served Carol with a formal notice at her own event. The board voted to remove her that afternoon. The breadfruit tree recovered. It is flowering now. A daisy would have loved that. Sylvia Crane, 68 years old, 26 years as a forensic accountant, the kind who gets called in when the numbers do not add up, and someone needs to find out exactly where they stopped adding up and why. She has been widowed twice. Her second husband, Thomas, died of a heart attack 6 years ago on a Sunday afternoon in the garden, weeding. He looked peaceful. He was not. Thomas loved succulents. He called them the pessimists of the plant world. After he died, Sylvia started collecting seriously. 340 specimens by the time she moved to the Crestwood Park community. Some were worth significant money. All were legal. She had acquisition records for everyone. Beverly Marsh, HOA treasurer, appeared at Sylvia's patio gate on day 7, looked at the labeled shelves, and said some of them looked unusual. Sylvia said that was the point of a rare collection. Day 5, citation. Day 12, second citation. Day 18, Beverly arrived with a man she called a horticultural compliance specialist who pointed at a large Euphorbia amic, a dramatic architectural specimen widely cultivated, and said it looked like it could be a controlled substance. Sylvia is 68 years old and has been a forensic accountant for 26 years. She has a very particular face she makes when someone says something that is both false and consequential. She made that face. The man's business card listed a website registered 4 days earlier. Day 24, Beverly filed a police report alleging the collection contained possible controlled substance plants. 2 officers arrived, walked the patio, found nothing actionable. Day 37, someone entered the patio, tool marks on the gate latch, and knocked over 2 shelving units. 41 specimens damaged, 11 destroyed. Replacement value, $3,800. Day 49, a letter arrived from what was presented as a state-controlled substance regulatory office. One word in the agency name was wrong. Sylvia noticed immediately. Her attorney, Donna Reyes, confirmed it was fabricated. Day 61, Beverly sent formal letters to 3 of Sylvia's neighbors, asking them to submit written statements about concerns regarding her property. 2 of those neighbors brought Sylvia the letters directly. One of them said, and Sylvia is quoting, "Beverly has lost her mind." Sylvia is a forensic accountant. When someone harasses her this aggressively, she looks for why. She pulled the HOA's financial records. What she found took 4 days to fully document. Assessment funds not reflected in meeting minutes. Vendor payments to companies she could not verify in any business registry. Beverly's signature on disbursement approvals. Total discrepancy across 4 fiscal years, $67,400. Not enormous, consistent, and precisely the kind of pattern Sylvia had spent 26 years learning to recognize. She prepared a 41-page forensic report with time-stamped source documents and reconciliation tables, the kind that holds up in court because every number has a citation and every citation has a document behind it. She contacted the county district attorney's consumer fraud division and a journalist named Miriam Cho, who covered financial crime. Miriam called the next morning and said she had never seen a citizen-prepared financial analysis this thorough. Sylvia told her she had been doing it for 26 years. Beverly's Crestwood Park Community Transparency Forum ended when Miriam Cho asked, on the record, whether Beverly wished to comment on the district attorney's preliminary review of the HOA's financial records, specifically the $67,400 in unverifiable disbursements bearing her signature. A botanist from the regional university, Dr. Carl Whitmore, stood and identified every succulent by species, held up a photograph of the Euphorbia amac, and stated that it was a widely cultivated ornamental with no chemical properties resembling any controlled substance. 2 investigators from the DA's office served Beverly Marsh with an arrest warrant for embezzlement and filing false complaints on camera at her own event. The 41 destroyed succulents were not replaceable. Some of them Thomas had helped her find. Sylvia keeps the empty spots on the shelf. She knows exactly what was there. She always knows exactly what was there. Jerome Whitfield, 61 years old, retired civil engineer, 33 years with the State Transportation Authority. He designed drainage systems for highways. Precise, patient, built for the long game. Jerome moved to the Sycamore Ridge community in Maricopa County in 2019. His wife Denise had finished her second round of chemotherapy 8 months earlier. The oncologist had used the word remission carefully, the way doctors do when they mean it, but do not want to promise it. Jerome had taken early retirement to be home with her. They wanted land, quiet, sun, something to tend together. In the spring of 2021, Jerome planted a quarter-acre plot of kenaf, Hibiscus cannabinus, a fiber crop with tall, angular stalks and broad palmate leaves, used industrially for paper pulp and rope fiber since the 1940s. It gave Denise something dramatic to watch rise from the ground. It looked nothing like marijuana, not to anyone who knew plants. Sandra Vale did not know plants. She knew power. Sandra was HOA board president of Sycamore Ridge Estates. 54 years old, real estate background, a silver Audi she parked diagonally across 2 spots at the clubhouse because the clubhouse was hers. In some fundamental way, she felt no need to explain. She wore lanyards with laminated credentials even at Saturday morning walkthroughs. She had run unopposed for board president 3 consecutive terms because most residents found conflict exhausting and Sandra found it invigorating. The first citation arrived in June of 2021, tucked under Jerome's windshield wiper. Violation of community aesthetic standards, subsection 4.2, unauthorized cultivation of unclassified vegetation. Fine, $250. Jerome looked at the citation, looked at his kenaf plot, went inside and pulled the original 1987 Master Deed Covenant for Sycamore Ridge. Section 9, Paragraph 3. Agricultural Use Exemption. Preserved for lots over 1/3 acre. Grandfathered from county zoning classification. Jerome's lot was 0.41 acres. The exemption was explicit and unambiguous. He had known it was there. He had checked before planting. He did not respond to the citation. He documented it. Day 8. Sandra knocked on the front door, with her vice president, Cliff, standing 2 steps behind her like a decorative shrub. She told Jerome the plants were a public safety concern and used the phrase marijuana field. Jerome said calmly that kenaf was a federally legal fiber crop and offered to spell it. Sandra said the board would pursue further action. Jerome wrote down the time, the exact words, the names of both people present. Day 14, second citation. Subsection 7.1, fine, $400, day 23. A man arrived claiming to be a county agricultural inspector. Clipboard, polo shirt, no insignia. He walked the perimeter of the Kenaf plot taking photographs. Jerome came outside and asked for his credentials and county employee ID. The man said he had left his badge in the truck. Jerome asked which county department. The man left without answering. Jerome photographed the truck's license plate, registered to a private surveying company with no county contract. Day 31. A letter arrived from a law firm, Hartwell and Associates, threatening injunctive relief. Jerome looked up Hartwell and Associates. The firm had been dissolved in 2018. The letterhead was fabricated. He added it to the binder. Day 44. Jerome came home to find the front 2 rows of his Kenaf plot cut down. Clean cuts, not wind damage. Denise was inside resting. He photographed the damage, measured the cut angles, noted the tool marks, and filed a police report. The responding officer took a statement and a copy of the citation history. Day 52. Sandra posted in the community's private Facebook group describing Jerome's property as a suspected narcotics cultivation site and using the phrase "under investigation." She tagged 3 neighbors by name. Jerome screenshotted everything before the post was edited. 20 minutes later, he saved the original. He always saved the original. Day 61. 2 neighbors approached Jerome separately, apologetically, to tell him Sandra had been calling people on the street asking them to sign a petition demanding his removal from the community. Jerome thanked both of them. He did not raise his voice. He did not call Sandra. Day 74. A letter arrived on what appeared to be county letterhead ordering him to appear before a zoning compliance hearing. He called the county zoning office. No record of any such hearing. No record of any complaint filed against his address. The letterhead had been forged. He photographed the letter, called the county clerk, and filed a formal report of document fraud. That was the moment Jerome stopped playing defense. He pulled the 1987 master deed again and cross-referenced it against the HOA's amended bylaws from 2009, the version Sandra had been citing. The 2009 amendments had attempted to override the agricultural exemption. But under Arizona statute, any amendment affecting grandfathered property rights required unanimous consent of affected lot owners. Jerome had never consented. The amendment was legally void. Every citation issued under it was void. Every fine was void. He contacted a property rights attorney named Celia Marsh. She confirmed the analysis in 40 minutes. She had seen this pattern before, she said. Not this exact version, but the shape of it. Jerome also contacted the Arizona Department of Real Estate and submitted the fabricated county letterhead, the dissolved law firm correspondence, the fake inspector's license plate registration, the Facebook post screenshots, and 37 days of documented harassment with timestamps and photographs. The investigator assigned called him back within a week. Jerome kept showing up to HOA meetings, quiet, taking notes, letting Sandra believe he was beaten. She believed it completely. In October of 2021, Sandra Vale organized what she called a community standards press event. She invited a local television news crew and 2 print journalists. She planned to present Jerome's property as a case study in HOA enforcement success. She had a slideshow. She stood at the podium in the clubhouse in front of neighbors and cameras and began her presentation. Jerome sat in the 3rd row. Celia Marsh sat beside him. 2 investigators from the Arizona Department of Real Estate sat in the back. Sandra was 4 slides in when Celia stood and addressed the room. She cited the 1987 Master Deed, Section 9, Paragraph 3. She cited the void 2009 amendment. She named the forged documents by date. She read the charge language aloud. Wire fraud, filing false government documents, criminal harassment, extortion under color of authority. The news crew was still recording. Sandra Vale was arrested at her own press conference. Cliff did not move from his chair. The cameras got everything. Wrong neighbor, Sandra. Wrong neighbor entirely. Here is what happened after the handcuffs. Sandra Vale was charged on 4 counts: wire fraud, filing false government documents, criminal harassment, and extortion under color of authority. She pleaded no contest to 2 counts 6 months later. She was sentenced to 18 months probation, 200 hours of community service, and ordered to pay restitution of $74,000, covering property damage, legal fees, and documented financial harm to the residents she had targeted. Her real estate license was suspended pending review. It was not reinstated. The HOA board held an emergency meeting the following week. A no-confidence vote passed with 81% of resident participation. The board was dissolved. A new interim committee formed. Jerome was invited to join. He declined politely. He had drainage systems to think about. He had Denise's garden to tend. Denise was still in remission, still watching things grow. The community organized the first Sycamore Ridge Greenhouse Open Day the following April. Residents opened their backyards, shared cuttings. Jerome walked people through the Kenaf plot, which had regrown fully. 3 kids asked if they could help harvest. He said yes. It became an annual event. And Marcus Hale, the man who started all of this, who built a greenhouse for a woman who never got to stand inside it long enough, established the Elena Hale Horticultural Fund that same year, named for his wife, focused on helping homeowners in HOA communities understand their grandfathered property rights before they needed a lawyer. Free covenant reviews, plain language guides, a phone line staffed by volunteer property law students 2 evenings a week. In the first year, the fund assisted 58 homeowners across 3 states. 39 of those cases were resolved without litigation. 1 resulted in an HOA board dissolution. 1 resulted in a state-level inquiry into HOA amendment procedures. The greenhouse is still standing. The 3rd orchid, Elena's favorite, Marcus, is still looking for it. He always finds what he is looking for eventually. Park where you live, know your rights, build your community. Drop your HOA nightmare in the comments. The craziest story gets featured next week. Name names if you're brave enough. Subscribe if you want justice served with a side of poetic irony. Next week, the HOA that tried to ban an American flag and did not see what was coming.